Hey everyone, I know it's been a long time since my last video. I got a job that is more time intensive, but I'm looking to return in some form. I would like to release videos again, however I can't keep the same cadence as before. I will do my best to provide the fans with the content they deserve. I am really appreciative of the outpouring support for this channel. Not to get too far ahead, but I want to give you guys a glimpse of what's to come. My next video will be a what if following the Godzilla 2000 storyline, where instead of being a standalone film, it was spun off into a series similar to the Heisei or the Showa era. I only have a little left to go and will release it soon. I think you guys will enjoy it. Now, without further wait, please enjoy Godzilla Wars 3. A year has gone by and work on Mogira and Mecha King Ghidorah have progressed well. Currently, Mogira is being tested in Siberia. The crew takes the mech underground to test its drilling abilities. However, during this process, they accidentally free the ancient Kaiju Batra. Now awoken and enraged, Batra heads out towards Moscow underground. Mogira's system fails to detect this and the crew continues to test the mech's abilities. At the same time, the US has enjoyed much success with its Mecha King Ghidorah project. The US has successfully grown a new Ghidorah body at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. While this Ghidorah isn't a complete clone, the US utilizes remnants of Mogira to craft the cyborg monster. The modifications to Ghidorah's body includes being reinforced with several robotic segments and equipped with a potent armament of advanced weaponry. Currently, the US is testing Mecha King Ghidorah, but in order to truly test its strength and abilities, the US has created a new Godzilla. In the midst of one of their fights, Mecha King Ghidorah fatally knocks out Godzilla, putting him in critical condition. In order to continue testing the cyborg, Godzilla is revived and the military blasts him with tons of nuclear energy. However, during this process, something goes horribly wrong and too much energy is absorbed by this Godzilla. Now Godzilla has entered what scientists have dubbed a meltdown mode. In this state, Godzilla is extremely overpowered and manages to free himself from the US Arctic base and training facility. Since burning Godzilla's temperature is incredibly hot, he melts the ice and snow around him, freeing another ancient monster. Free from his ice prison, Gamera is awoken. However, with the US focused on burning Godzilla, Gamera manages to leave the area undetected. In desperate need of help, the US contacts G-Force, however they demand total anonymity. Since the Absolute Zero cannon isn't fully functional, it's decided to use the Super X-2 to lure burning Godzilla to Antarctica and away from the public. Once there, they will freeze the monster before he can destroy the world. At the same time, G-Force gets an alert that a monster has arrived in Beijing. Gamera arrives in Beijing and lands in the city. Gamera begins laying waste to the area as he walks through the streets of Beijing. Buildings explode left and right as Gamera destroys everything in his path. G-Force decides to send Mechagodzilla to Beijing as Gamera continues to rampage in the area. Gamera destroys everything in his path. Citizens are unable to escape his fire breath. Buildings collapse as the monster destroys everything in sight. In the midst of Gamera's rampage, Mechagodzilla arrives. Gamera sees Mechagodzilla and attacks. Mechagodzilla blasts Gamera with his Mega Buster and smashes him into a building. Gamera gets back up as Mechagodzilla fires his plasma grenade. Gamera gets knocked down again. Gamera gets back up and attacks Mechagodzilla. Gamera unleashes his fire breath. In Moscow, Batra explodes from underground and begins destroying everything in sight. Tanks begin rolling down the street to take on the monster, but they are no use against his prism laser attack. The USSR sends out Mogira to fight Batra. The crew is prepped and heads out. Batra crawls through the city, obliterating buildings left and right. Batra smashes buildings and destroys an oil tanker, triggering a massive explosion. In the middle of Batra's rampage, Mogira arrives and challenges the monster. Mogira flies through the area and fires at Batra. Batra fires back but misses. The monsters go back and forth. Batra is slammed into a building. Mogira launches more missiles at the giant larva monster. Batra gets back up and fires his prism laser attack, knocking Mogira out of the sky. The mech crashes to the ground but quickly regains itself. Batra, however, fires at Mogira again, causing the mech to crash into a building. The damage causes Mogira to remain down and the crew scrambles to figure out how to get Mogira working again. Batra destroys the last of Moscow and then burrows back underground. Meanwhile, burning Godzilla nears a power plant in Alaska. However, the Super X-2 has just arrived. The Super X-2 engages burning Godzilla and begins leading him away from the power plant and towards Antarctica. The US monitors Godzilla's temperature and fear he will go into a meltdown mode, which will destroy the entire world. The Super X-2 fires its Absolute Zero cannon, temporarily cooling the monster. While effective, it also slows the monster down, adding more time onto the trip. Back in Beijing, Mechagodzilla and Gamera trade attacks until Mechagodzilla is smashed backwards and crashes into a building. Mechagodzilla gets back up and fires his Mega Buster. In the midst of their fight, Godzilla erupts out of the bay and comes ashore. Godzilla fires his atomic breath at both monsters. Gamera looks at Godzilla and roars. Godzilla makes his way through the city, destroying everything in his path. Gamera moves in on Godzilla, and the monsters begin fighting. Gamera and Godzilla go back and forth, trading attacks. attacks. Godzilla slams Gamera into a building. Gamera gets back up and flies towards Godzilla and knocks him down to the ground. Gamera lands and moves in on Godzilla. Mechagodzilla fires a barrage of attacks at once at Gamera, gaining his attention. Mechagodzilla moves in and fires again as Godzilla gets back up and charges Gamera. With Gamera still down, Godzilla fires his atomic breath as Mechagodzilla fires his Mega Buster. After the explosion clears, Gamera gets back up and pushes Mechagodzilla and Godzilla away. Gamera transforms into his flying form and Godzilla watches as Gamera retreats into the night sky. Godzilla looks at Mechagodzilla ready for a rematch and roars. Right at the last minute, Godzilla senses something and heads out instead. However, after some time, Godzilla is unable to sense anything and returns to the Marshall Islands. Just then, it's reported that Batra has emerged in Berlin. Taken off guard, the military rushes to fight the monster. Since Mogira is out of commission, it's decided to send Mechagodzilla to fight Batra. G-Force deploys reinforcements in the area, but they are no use against Batra. Batra destroys everything in his path as he rampages in Berlin. Batra uses his laser attacks to level buildings left and right. Tanks are no match as they are easily destroyed. However, sensing Batra since his attack in Moscow, Mothra has been heading for the monster. After traveling for some time, Mothra has arrived and enters Berlin. Mothra finds Batra and the monsters see each other and instantly engage. Mechagodzilla is held back to see if Mothra can defeat Batra. Batra fires at Mothra in the distance, but Mothra dodges the attack. Mothra flies over Batra, knocking him down. Batra gets back up and fires at Mothra again. The monsters exchange attacks, destroying the surrounding area. Eventually, their attacks collide, causing a massive explosion, pushing both monsters back. Batra lets out a loud roar and then retreats underground. Injured, Mothra retreats to the Marshall Islands. While flying across Asia, Gamera hears Batra's cry for help and begins heading towards his location. The Super X2's Absolute Zero Cannon is no longer effective against Burning Godzilla. Now enraged, Burning Godzilla is battling with the Super X2. Burning Godzilla overpowers the Super X2 and forces it to retreat. Burning Godzilla heads underwater and changes his course for Japan. G-Force and the US scramble to figure out Godzilla's location but are unable to find him. Meanwhile, Batra erupts from underground in Brussels and lets out another loud roar. Gamera hears Batra again and speeds towards him. Batra crawls through the city, destroying everything in his path. Thankfully, back in Moscow, the Mogira crew has managed to fix the mech. The USSR informs the world that Mogira can fight Batra again. It's decided to hold Mechagodzilla back for now and have Mogira fight instead. In the middle of Batra's rampage, Gamera arrives. The two ancient monsters destroy Brussels together. The monsters destroy buildings left and right. Fires break out as the city turns into a sea of flames. With the two monsters attacking, it's decided to send in Mechagodzilla for support. At the same time, G-Force is finally able to track Burning Godzilla again. They locate him off the coast of Japan and determine that he will be in Osaka Bay within an hour. With the mech spread thin, the US decides to use Mecha King Ghidorah to kill Burning Godzilla once and for all. However, at the same time, Godzilla is clearly able to detect Burning Godzilla and begins heading out for the Marshall Islands. Noticing this and also healed, Mothra also heads out. At the same time, Rodan and Anguirus see the commotion and decide to see what's going on. Meanwhile, in Brussels, Batra and Gamera continue to destroy the area, crushing everything in sight. Eventually, Mogira and Mechagodzilla arrive in the area and begin engaging with the monsters. At the same time, Burning Godzilla arrives in Osaka and exits the Bay Area. He enters the city and begins destroying everything in sight. Due to the monster's incredible heat, everything begins to melt around him. With the world in shock that there is a second Godzilla, the US decides to break its silence and reveals Mecha King Ghidorah. G-Force gets an idea and it's decided to have Mogira and Mechagodzilla lure Batra and Gamera to Osaka. Officials think that perhaps Burning Godzilla in his current state is powerful enough to kill Gamera and Batra. Once defeated, Mogira, Mechagodzilla, and Mecha King Ghidorah will team up and transport Burning Godzilla to Antarctica to prevent a meltdown. With the plan set, Mogira and Mechagodzilla receive instructions and begin luring the monsters to Osaka. Mogira fires at Batra and then transforms. Ground Mogira begins leading Batra underground. Air Mogira and Mechagodzilla fire at Gamera and head out to Osaka. Enraged, the monsters follow after the mechs. Burning Godzilla destroys Osaka as the Super X enters position to buy time for Mecha King Ghidorah, Mogira, and Mechagodzilla. Burning Godzilla attacks the Super X as he makes his way through the city. The Super X dodges the attacks and fires missiles at the monster, enraging him further. Burning Godzilla unleashes his atomic breath, causing critical damage to the Super X. Suddenly, Mecha King Ghidorah arrives in the area and begins battling with Burning Godzilla. The Super X retreats as the mech crews give a status update. After leading Batra into the ocean, the Mogira crew decides to recombine the two halves. This process confuses Gamera in the air, causing him to attack Mogira. Mogira dodges the attacks, but Gamera repeatedly fires at the mech. Mechagodzilla tries to stop Gamera, but is unsuccessful. The Mogira crew reports that they can't dodge the attack for much longer. Eventually, Gamera hits Mogira, causing some damage. As the mechs enter the city, Gamera fires at Mogira, critically damaging him. Mogira crashes into a building nearby. Gamera flies into the city as Batra evolves into an even more powerful flying form in Osaka Bay. Batra enters Osaka and attacks Mechagodzilla. He fires his laser attack, pushing Mechagodzilla down to the ground. Gamera and Batra begin rampaging in Osaka unopposed. Attracted to Osaka by burning Godzilla, Godzilla arrives in Osaka Bay and roars. Anguirus swims behind as the monsters enter the area. Mothra flies in overhead with Rodan as the monsters come ashore. Godzilla marches through Osaka, destroying everything in his path until he gains the attention of Gamera and Batra. G-Force, however, doesn't want Godzilla to interfere with Mecha King Ghidorah and burning Godzilla. Mecha King Ghidorah is ordered to move its fight away from the monsters so they aren't disturbed. Gamera unleashes his fire attack at the monsters. Mothra dodges the attack and fires a laser attack from her antenna. Batra comes to Gamera's aid and fires at Mothra. The monsters dogfight in the sky as Anguirus and Godzilla attack Gamera. Rodan rains down his atomic breath, tossing Gamera into a building. Batra shoots Mothra out of the sky, causing her to crash to the ground. Godzilla fires at Batra in the sky, attracting his attention as Gamera gets back up. Anguirus gets into a ball and charges Gamera, knocking him backwards. Mothra regains herself and gets back in the sky. Rodan follows after her and the two battle with Batra. As they go back and forth trading attacks, the city is destroyed even further. Godzilla looks up at the sky and fires his atomic breath some more. Gamera senses Batra is in trouble and also takes to the sky. Mechagodzilla gets back up from the debris and fires at Gamera and Batra flying in the sky after Mothra. Enraged, Batra heads for Mechagodzilla. Gamera continues after Mothra, firing at her. Mechagodzilla fires his plasma grenade and smashes Batra into a building. Godzilla moves in on Batra and gets ready to end him with his atomic breath. However, Batra emerges and pushes the monsters back. Rodan helps Mothra and attacks Gamera. Gamera gets behind Rodan and gets ready to knock him out. However, Mogira at the last minute saves Rodan. Mogira fires at Gamera, causing the monster to crash to the ground. Rodan rains down his atomic breath as Mogira lands nearby. Gamera gets back up and fires at Rodan, pushing him back. Mogira moves in behind and gets ready to fire his spiral grenade missiles, hoping to pierce Gamera's shell. In the distance, Mothra and Batra battle in the sky, destroying the surrounding area. Rodan calls out to his flock for backup as Gamera obliterates Mogira's spiral grenade missiles with his fire breath. Godzilla moves in on Gamera and fires his atomic breath. Anguirus gets ready to charge. Gamera swats Anguirus away and attacks Godzilla as Batra knocks Mothra out of the sky. Mechagodzilla engages Batra and fires his plasma grenade again, however Batra dodges the attack. Rodan decides to chase after Batra and the two begin fighting. In the midst of their fight, more Rodan arrive and overwhelm Batra. Mechagodzilla fires his Mega Buster, knocking the monster from the sky. Mothra moves in and uses her scales attack to subdue the monster. Unable to fight anymore, Batra flees the area and finds a place to rest. Gamera has created a firewall between himself and Godzilla. The Rodans move in and rain down their attacks at Gamera. Meanwhile, the Mogira crew takes advantage of this opportunity and heads underground. Mogira fires from underground, confusing Gamera. Godzilla fires his atomic breath at Gamera from afar, knocking him back. Mothra's wind gusts tamper the fires. Mothra moves in and uses her scales attack on Gamera. Gamera is unaffected and continues to fight until Mechagodzilla fires his shock cables. Mechagodzilla shocks Gamera and the beast crashes to the ground. However, Gamera manages to rip the cables out before the next shock. Mothra moves in and uses her scales attack as Godzilla and the Rodans rain down their atomic breath. Overwhelmed and defeated, Gamera falls to the ground again. Mothra and the Rodans move in and lift the monster out of the area. Following Mothra's lead, they head for the Arctic. Meanwhile, Mecha King Ghidorah has managed to subdue burning Godzilla and has injected anti-nuclear energy bacteria into the monster. Noticing that the bacteria is beginning to work, Mechagodzilla and Mogira are ordered to keep Godzilla away from Mecha King Ghidorah. This way, Mecha King Ghidorah can transport the dying burning Godzilla out to sea uninterrupted. However, after defeating Batra and Gamera, Godzilla senses something and looks around. Godzilla leaves the area before he can be stopped. Godzilla moves into another part of the city and destroys everything in his path as he searches for burning Godzilla. Eventually, Godzilla finds Mecha King Ghidorah and sees burning Godzilla. Mechagodzilla and Mogira arrive and attempt to stop Godzilla, but it's too late. Godzilla engages with Mecha King Ghidorah. The two go back and forth for a bit as Godzilla attempts to save his own kind. However, Mechagodzilla, Mogira, and Mecha King Ghidorah manage to force Godzilla back. Mechagodzilla fires his Mega Buster. Mogira launches missiles, and Mecha King Ghidorah unleashes his gravity beams. Godzilla crashes backwards into a building and is trapped beneath debris. Mecha King Ghidorah launches a grappling hook that latches onto burning Godzilla and then lifts off. As Mecha King Ghidorah begins transporting burning Godzilla out of the city, Godzilla erupts from the debris. Godzilla sees Mecha King Ghidorah in the sky and fires at the cyborg. While the first shot of Atomic Breath misses, Godzilla strikes the cyborg with a second blast. Although injured, Mecha King Ghidorah makes it out of the city and begins flying across the ocean. However, mid-flight an alert goes off indicating that the cyborg is in critical condition. It's decided to drop burning Godzilla into the ocean instead of bringing the corpse to Antarctica. Killed by the anti-nuclear energy bacteria, burning Godzilla's corpse sinks to the bottom of the Philippine Sea. With burning Godzilla defeated, Mecha King Ghidorah returns to base for repairs. However, at the bottom of the Philippine Sea, a skeleton remains.